existed here for hundreds and thousands of years. So Creative Mornings Tucson acknowledges the sovereignty of Native nations and acknowledges the 22 federally recognized indigenous tribes of the state of Arizona and those who inhabit Pima County. We strive to be mindful of how we can participate in unsettling the systems of colonialism that live around and within us. And if you're ever curious on whose unceded land you currently live on, this little QR code will show you a really cool map. And if you ever want to chat more about this, I'm always around. And Creative Mornings is just one of hundreds of thousands of chapters globally. We are in 244 cities within 70 countries with 27,000 attendees per month, about 11,958 talks online, and 13.7 million video views. So if you ever find yourself in a different city, check them out. A lot of our global chapters do some really, really cool stuff, just like we do. Find yourself in a different city, check out Creative Mornings. And a lot of our chapters also stream their events just like us. So if you're ever curious who's doing what on a Friday that we don't have an event, there's always someone doing something. And with Creative Mornings, for those of y'all that are new, we have a little manifesto for our community. I'll invite you to read it with me. If you don't, I can, take on the helm here, but I would love some hope. I don't want to hear my voice the entire time. Everyone is creative. A creative life requires bravery and action, honesty and hard work. We are here to support you, celebrate with you, and encourage you to make the things you love. We believe in the power of community. We believe in giving a damn. We believe in face-to-face connections, in learning from others, in hugs and high fives. We bring together people who are driven by passion and purpose, confident that they will inspire one another and inspire change in neighborhoods and cities around the world. Everyone is welcome. And with that, we do have a few of our global sponsor slides that I'm going to share with y'all. We are currently partnering with Adobe again globally. They also believe in the power of creativity and community. And by a show of hands here, who's used an Adobe product in the past month? All right, that's kind of what I was thinking. You're going to love what we're announcing with our next slide here. So who's ready to level up in your creative career? We've teamed up with Adobe to bring you a series of online workshops and resources designed to help you stand out and find the right opportunities. I will go ahead and share a link on our Creative Mornings Tucson Instagram and via our wrap-up newsletter for this event. They're doing a series of just great overall things that you can level up to do in your career and just continue to learn. Shout out to Adobe as our global partner. And into some of our local community partners. We couldn't do what we do without Serious Visual. Thank you so much, Chris and the team. Y'all really have been supportive since the very beginning of this, and we super appreciate everything that y'all do for us. And our local community partners and a lot of our volunteers, actually. So if you're ever looking for photographers, videographers, we've got a killer staff for volunteers for us. Give it up for Celestial Photography, Justin Hagen, and Raya at Tucson Mall Photography. They make us look good everywhere we go. And our venue sponsor, thank you so much to Saka and the team here at Catalyst for hosting us this morning. We're super excited to be back in this space. And we couldn't do what we do without our volunteer team, so give it up for everybody. For those of y'all who aren't familiar with Creative Mornings, we do this because we love what we do in these events on. We do it with the power of community. We don't have a budget. We're not a 501c3. We're really just Tucsonans who love the creative community. So if you're ever interested in partnering with us or seeing what else we're up to, please send us an email or slide into our DMs. We're Tucson@creativemornings.com. Yeah. So with that, we are here this morning to celebrate the theme Revival. Our May theme was chosen by our Fort Worth chapter in Texas, and it was illustrated by Marielle Guzman. So they write a nice little blurb about our theme. So here we go. Everything old is new again. Sums up the revivals that bubble up throughout culture. Clothing styles, art movements, and all kinds of things come back into fashion decades after their popularity originally waned. Shout out to the revival of overalls. paradigm, take something old, dust it off, and adopt it to suit the present moment. But are there really no original ideas left? Has everything been done? Does it matter? New context adds new meaning. You can recycle whatever you want, just make it your own. Lots of things from the past are worth saving from obscurity. What we need is a few more revivals. A revival of empathy and understanding, kindness and caring, a revival of handwritten notes and holding open doors for strangers. Let's pursue hobbies and join clubs instead of optimizing and monetizing every hour. Bring back boredom and curiosity. It's time for a revival of the golden rule. It's up to you to distill the best of the past and create a better future. And before I welcome our talkers up to the stage, I would like to, oh my God, all right, let's choke up here. I would like to just introduce y'all to Kevin and Matt, so I'll start with Matt. Matt Rolland is a deputy director at the Southern Arizona Arts and Cultural Alliance, SACA for short, where he leads the development of innovative community programs and cultural spaces that support artists, makers, and creative entrepreneurs. He played a key role in designing and launching Catalyst Creative Collective, a 14,000 square foot arts hub in Tucson Mall, where we currently are this morning, that brings together artists, nonprofits, and the public for collaborative creation, learning, and engagement. In addition to his role at SACA, Matt is a performing musician, board president of the Tucson Folk Festival, and a board member of Arizona Citizens for the Arts. A lifelong fiddle player and arts advocate, he has performed nationally, released 8 studio albums, and appeared twice on a Prairie Home Companion. Matt holds degrees in economics and international studies from the University of Arizona and is a Fulbright and Flynn Scholar. Give it up for Matt.
Woo!
And our second speaker this morning is Kevin Larkin, a composer, sound artist, and arts administrator whose work blends genres and disciplines. Performing under the name Pineross, he draws from roots in Celtic, bluegrass, and folk music, blending these traditions with electronically manipulated field recordings and elements of performance arts. He spent a decade creating theatrical productions with the Denver-based avant-folk band Chimney Choir and has brought his work to unconventional settings, from performing suspended in trees at the Breckenridge International Festival of Art to creating immersive sound installations as artist in residence at Great Sand Dunes National Park. His collaboration spans with filmmakers, dancers, puppeteers, songwriters, environmentalists, and poets. For the past 5 years, Kevin has served here as the program manager of Catalyst Creative Collective. He coordinates more than 600 events annually, including workshops, culinary classes, music recitals, and recording sessions. Outside of his professional work, Kevin is dedicated to uplifting his community through neighborhood advocacy and by supporting Tucson's refugee population. In his free time, how do you find the free time? He enjoys hiking with his wife and dogs and playing mandolin in a hammock. Please welcome Kevin and Matt.
So try to go up there and hit it, and it'll go blank. Like, don't point it at the projector. Well, maybe we don't even. Let's see. Look under your seats. Thank you. I was looking for the mic. Even though I don't need a mic in this space, let's be honest. My name's Kevin Larkin. I use he, him pronouns. I'm the manager here at Catalyst Creative Collective. And yeah, we thought we would start with some music because music is technically older than speech in human evolution. And it's just fascinating when you can communicate with someone when you don't speak the same language, when you might not have the same culture. When I first met Matt, I knew nothing about Matt, but we knew about probably more like 200 of the same tunes. And that's actually what brought me to Saka. I saw Matt have a fiddle in his hand, and I was looking for a job when I moved to Tucson. So, yeah, we thought we'd start with a little jam with everybody just to, get a little creative this morning and kind of focus on music as connection, music as community, and it's a special thing that brought Matt and I together and brought us to this work. So what we're going to talk about today is Catalyst, the space you're in, and the journey of Saka. I think I have this clicker in my pocket. So the topic is revival, also fitting for bluegrass musicians. Bluegrass kind of developed in these old school tent show revivals, born from Christian music that they would travel around and set up massive tents and just kind of start shredding bluegrass. It's kind of how the genre developed. It was always a mobile genre. It would always kind of move from town to town. And they were called tent show revivals. And it still continues that way today. And Matt will speak a little bit more about that, how it comes to Tucson still. We, with this kind of traditional music, is also seeing a revival in its own right. And the revival of music is something that constantly fascinates me as an artist. How can we take these old traditions, these things that we've been exploring together for, millennia, and always recycle them and update them? And, what is traditional music versus what is modern music is always really a fascinating concept to me as an artist. So, yeah, we're going to get started with a little revival of a different sort. And this is the revival of retail spaces. Never thought I would be involved in this whatsoever. My last time in a mall was probably, when I was in my 20s. Hadn't been in a mall in a very long time. Heard that they were dying. And Saka actually has a lot of roots in working with different retailers to bring local artists to shopping spaces and to kind of activate these spaces. So we had done chalk art competitions. We'd done programming at Tucson Premium Outlets. We've done a lot of kind of like tangential programming with some of the retail spaces in town. And here at the Tucson Mall, we actually had our office on the other side. And it was a small office, not really an event space at all. And as all of the big box stores, well, actually, is this working? See if I can advance. There it goes. That's us. Up is down. I know that. I've told people that before. Hey, that's pretty crazy. CreativeMornings right here in Catalyst. Oh, okay. So, retail spaces. I think these are a little strangely out of order, but it doesn't matter, y'all. This is a creative morning. We'll improvise. So, Saka had our offices on the other end of the mall, and all these big box stores were closing. The Gap, we had, what else? Tons of stores going under. Sears went out, and all these retail spaces opened up, and the mall management was looking for a way to revive them in a different way, right? Everyone's shopping on Amazon. Unfortunately, a lot of local businesses were getting put out, and a lot of the bigger retailers couldn't keep up with online shopping. And it all happened so fast that the mall asked Saka if we would like to move into a bigger space. And we were like, sure. I think there's probably 800 square foot office. Like, how about 14,000 square feet? I was like, okay. So in this process, Catalyst has always been a collaborative space. And we said yes, and we had a lot of help from the mall, a lot of help from a lot of early partners to make this space a reality. And at the time, Tucson Mall, this was the Gap, and this was the Gap Kids. And so the whole entire space was gutted, an early picture of Catalyst, and we set to work with a couple different groups. The Frank Lloyd Wright School of Architecture had their students do the design as a senior project. The mall management at the time really helped with the build out. We hired all local artists. We had conversations with Zero Craft, Sonoran Glass, Bit Buckets, which was a high school robotics team, which I think is the next one. So there's Catalyst with nothing on the walls and a robot in the middle. That was the origins. So we started slowly filling the space, and it was inviting to a lot of different groups. We had Hacienda at the Canyon, Don Lurie and Donna Norden were early supporters of the kitchen. We had the Southern Arizona Symphony, which I think might be the next slide. Let's see, Matt, I think I got it. Here is Eric and Maria installing the sign. We had Bookmans that donated all these supplies, some volunteers making hanging clouds. Ignacio, whose work is involved in a lot in Catalyst, he had an office here. He worked with high schoolers from Amphi to do all the offices in the back. Here's the Southern Arizona Symphony. This is back when smartphones were blurry pictures, but they were one of our early partners rehearsing before we even opened to the public, and they're still here today. So it was a massive collaborative vision, and we did a lot on the back end in order to get ready for the launch, and then in December of 2019, we opened the gates, and it was nuts. I had personally been working with the organization for about 3 months, and we had a full staff dedicated to classrooms, teachers. We worked with tons of nonprofits, had all sorts of markets, First Fridays, live music, STEM education, concerts. It was just totally bonkers. Here's Kate, our executive director, who had a lot of this vision. Kate can move massive amounts of energy for any of you that know Kate. So this was definitely one of her, passion projects that kind of spread through the whole community. And then just as we were getting going, there was a rule that came into place, and we couldn't really do what Saka does anymore. So Catalyst, like everything else, quickly shut down just a few months after it opened. And we quickly remobilized and had to revive the space in a different way. And this wasn't just this space, it was the whole community. So Catalyst actually changed really quickly into a space for the community that really needed the essential things in life, especially when it came to the arts. We had a ton of retirement communities that were isolated. You couldn't even go in there. Family couldn't visit. Jessica remembers this time. She was here during this, but we really tried to make an impact as much as we could through spreading creativity and art. We put together arts care packages, solicited hundreds of artists to donate supplies, to paint works, to do kits, and we delivered hundreds and hundreds of these to different senior living facilities. And here's Matt, fully masked. I think gloves on too, Matt. That was back when we wore gloves. Making these kits during COVID to deliver to these places. We also had artworks, like bigger artwork, donated from local artists that just volunteered to paint these for the community, and they get delivered to the facilities. We also had Mending Souls in here. We turned into a mask making factory for a couple of weeks, doing handmade masks. Lisa Stirs with Red Herring Puppets really helped out with that. We rented the space out to artists that you couldn't have anyone in your space. This is a spice artist that used the kitchen to create a massive mural out of spices. So a lot of interesting things happened. Of course, we learned to live stream. We did so much live streaming. We had bikist classes, orchestra concerts, live experimental things with Salvador Duran and Ignacio. Danelle and I doing a STEM education workshop. We took our Undercover Arts magazine and we went mobile. We had cooking classes, concerts for senior living communities, interviews with artists that were doing album releases. We had a salsa group based in here. So throughout these slower years of kind of like reviving and rebuilding, started to shape what would then become the next revival that would happen in Catalyst once all the mandates were lifted and we could gather again. Saka, we basically took all of our festivals and we just condensed it into here, and we tried to do as much outreach as we could. This is actually a picture of CreativeMornings from 2023. But our model changed, right? We had to revive in a different way. We no longer had the staff to fill the space with our own programming as we did in the past. We also met a lot of nonprofits, businesses, artists that needed space, and that were either lost their rent, didn't have anywhere else to go, had changed their models like we did. So we ended up meeting a lot of really cool groups, many of whom are still today. We had a music nonprofit that gives free music lessons to the community that moved out of their space. So we started doing music lessons here. We became a home for art markets, whose venues, with this, we had HEPA filters in this space, and it was air conditioned, so it was a pretty attractive place to gather. We had the Native American Co-op Market for 5 years, a monthly market called the Desert Artisans. We hosted the Bicus Art Auction. We had a paint and sip business that was mobile, that not as many people were inviting people into their homes to do these things. So Angela's with us today with Art Mixer. She moved in. STEM education. We had the Amazing Systems Thinking and the Water Center for Systems Thinking do STEM workshops for teachers. We had a couple food artists move in, Humble Board, quickly growing people in the community that needed a space to go. Krista was one of them. She had a kiosk in the mall. It was pretty amazing to see her trajectory, and we were glad to offer support. Esperanza Dance Project, they're a great nonprofit here in Tucson that dances in middle schools and high schools. And they lost their rehearsal space, so we hosted a fundraiser. They ended up becoming a partner through this time. We hosted the VA Creative Arts Exhibition. At the VA, they didn't really have a spot for the public to come view their art, so really talented artists at the VA started coming here, and we would host their yearly exhibition, which we still do today. So all this said, the space was really shaped by the people that were using it. We didn't really have, one more of my favorites, the Amphi Student Art Show. It just left, but it takes over the whole mall. And we reached out to the Amphi School District and said, hey, if you want performers and like a place to host your sculpture, come into Catalyst. So now we host all the family reception every year for all the middle school and high school artists. We had a youth theater production. This is a high school theater troupe called the Inner Voice Studios. They do amazing work. So they have really transformed the space. We've hosted many of these. So after all this, we decided we weren't really an arts and makerspace anymore. When we opened, we were Catalyst Arts and Makerspace. We did a lot with robotics. We did a lot of programming on our own. But it became more of a creative collective. It became more of a home for a lot of different groups. We weren't even really doing any programming anymore. It was all of our partners. So in 2023, we rebranded to the Catalyst Creative Collective, got a whole bunch of new art installations in the space, and since then we've been growing steadily. The one program that we did launch during that time was our Artist in Residence program, and this has been one of our favorite programs to see unfold. In 2023, we realized we were still so short-staffed that we couldn't be here every weekend, and the doors were closed. What good is an art space when the doors are closed? So we thought, why don't we just give the key to an artist and see what happens? And a lot has happened in those 2 years. We drove a VW bus with the comic book mobile all the way into the mall and brought it in here. Did free kids programming for an entire summer. We had Team Studio Create doing, turning the whole space into a photo gallery and VR gallery. You can put on a headset and walk around. Light the Mic Open Mic. Jamila Hill, an artist who had never had a residency, was just kind of at the start of her career, a visual artist, ended up putting together some performing arts programs, and it just grew and grew and grew. They just moved to Splinter Collective. We had them for 2 years, and it was one of the coolest experiences that we had. And again, this is just artists leading the way of Catalyst. Here are many of the artists in residence we've had. Lourdes Lerner is here right now, a poet. She has a workshop tonight, if anyone's not doing anything. But it's just been a joy to kind of get to know the community through this program and get to support them as best as we can. Catalyst by our numbers, and I think these are a little under at this point, but every year we host over 50 events, about 200 meetings and rehearsals. We put on, 25 concerts, 300 plus classes. We also host, like I said, with the culinary space, people just come in and prep their food. We do the same thing with recording sessions. We have about 6 summer camps this summer. Over 16,000 people come through the doors every year, and close to 2,000 artists have had something to do with this space. And then we work with a lot of different artist education opportunities. So this is free program for the community where artists can learn. We have a lot of opportunities like that in Catalyst. That's one of our main focus. And we collaborate with over 26 organizations, and we've been able to commission through grants and sponsorships many new artworks, one of which is in the music lab, so definitely check it out. Joe Musselman has some awesome musical sculptures in there. So, Catalyst is revival. We've had to continuously revive this space. We've had to really constantly think about how we're going to revive it because the world changes so fast these days. And I really appreciate you all being here and listening to our story. Without further ado, I'll introduce Matt, our Deputy Director, to talk a little bit about what's coming next.
Revival.
It's the down button.
Down?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, Kevin, everybody. And Kevin needs so much credit because so much of that personality and character and creative community that is happening in those photos, it is because of Kevin and his generous creative spirit. So thank you, Kevin. So I'm going to broaden the lens a little bit and try to give a little bit more context about how Catalyst exists within the scope of work that Saka does, and also focus on a few, as we reflected on different themes of revival, how that connects to some of our different pieces of our work. So I guess I'll start. I wanted to share, this is about inspiration, right? These Creative Mornings. So I decided to pick a couple of pieces of inspiration I've had over the years. One is this book called Robert Grudin, Time and the Art of Living. Has anyone read this book? Someone gave me this book when I graduated from college, and I just remembered it's been on my shelf because my nephew just graduated from college, and so I saw it on the shelf, and I was like, I should buy him this book, and so I bought it. But I highly recommend it. It's it's divided into just little, it's almost like devotionals, but it's not a spiritual necessarily. It's just these paragraph-long thoughts, and everything is connected to the idea of time. And ultimately, time is the great connector, right? We're living in this time, and everything we do is defined by time. And so the chapters are divided up into different themes about how time connects to different pieces. So I was feeling a little tired and old last night, so I chose a quote from the Growth and Age chapter. As we grow older, our youth silently expands in time, while old age conversely contracts. At 22, having graduated from college, I considered my youth at an end, forgetting I had come to a similar conclusion at leaving high school at 18. Now in my 40s, I consider my life up to age 33 a kind of twilight adolescence. Old age, which once for me included the late 30s, has now accordingly scuttled back into the underbrush beyond age 65. I expect this process will continue, at least in a kind of parabolic curve through the rest of At 50, I will probably look back at 40 with indulgence, perhaps envy. I and others like me live in a kind of eternal middle age, and no wonder, for no matter where we are in age, we are always in the middle of time and must weigh our future equally with our past. So Saka, we've been existing for about 30 years as an organization. We are an arts nonprofit, started out as the Greater Oro Valley Arts Council, started by a very passionate group of founders that wanted to bring more art and creativity to Oro Valley. And that looked at that time like bringing the Tucson Symphony up to Oro Valley, which was presented by the town for many years, bringing classical music education into the programs. Every student in Oro Valley got to listen to music on the loudspeakers while they read books, and bringing in music education to the schools. starting the 1% for Public Art program. Those are some of the big initiatives up in Oro Valley by our founders. We were called GOVAC in those days. And then as the economy changed and the community changed, the organization spun off and became a more regional presence. And so we became the Southern Arizona Arts and Cultural Alliance because a lot of other towns at that time were losing their arts department. They were losing their arts council, their arts alliance. And so Kate, our executive director, worked with the board to put the cart before the horse and said, yes, there needs to be a more regional arts presence to support and connect all these different towns and partners and serve more of an ecosystem role. And our mission stayed the same, which was to create and preserve opportunities for artists, but also being a willing collaborative partner, to have a retail space come up and say, what could you create if we gave you an office space? What could you create if we gave you the old Gap and Gap kids? And think about how that could serve the artistic community. That's always been the mission and the vision, and to be flexible. And so over the years, those programs have changed and shifted a lot, but that core mission is really the same, is to be a collaborative partner. And we are looking this summer, we'll be updating our name because we are doing so much work in the Phoenix area, so much work in northern Arizona as well, and central Arizona, that we'll actually be updating our name to reflect that statewide presence. And we want to continue serving a role here in southern Arizona, but also be able to take what we've learned down here and share it with everyone up north, because we all know better down here, right? So quick umbrella of our programs. We do a lot of advocacy work. So as they mentioned, I sit on the State Citizens for the Arts Board, which just kind of give you a little bit of context. Arizona is in the 5 lowest states for arts funding, public arts funding. At the state level, and it is a very dire time for public arts funding. As some of you may be following in the news, the National Endowment for the Arts is probably on the chopping block. It's not in the current federal budget. So it's very possible in 6 months we won't have a National Endowment for the Arts. And that means that there have been about 40 organizations in the state that have lost their national grant, including several great organizations here in Tucson. But it will trickle down, not to paint a dire picture, but it will trickle down in the next couple of years, because when that national endowment money disappears, the state then doesn't have the matching money to re-grant, and so you will see that trickle out both in their individual artist grants and their nonprofit grants. And so we are very concerned about what that means for our arts ecosystem to have the national endowment go away. But we really encourage you to stay engaged. You can join our email list, you can join the Citizens for the Arts email list, but it's only through grassroots advocacy and people speaking up that public funding for the arts can continue. So that's a big part of what we're doing moving forward, trying to be a voice for advocacy. Programming, so Catalyst is a program. We run arts and crafts festivals all over the state, culinary festivals, business and arts partnerships. We run galleries in non-traditional spaces. So we'll work with Roche Tissue Diagnostics and say, well, how can you use these walls to engage your employees and create an opportunity for artists? And so that's been one of the greatest business partnerships we've had in the last 20 years. It's a multi-decade running project that has an employee photography project. It has local community art exhibits come in, and each of those openings draws close to 500 people. And so really is a chance for the community to come together and engage with a major research center. Placemaking, how many of you are familiar with the idea of placemaking? Familiar word? I mean, it's basically the idea of using art and using culture to define our sense of place and have a community conversation. But it's a sort of catch-all term for public art, for public festivals that represent and portray our culture, and trying to transform our spaces so it reflects us. So it has this community dialogue. That's not something that's just brought in from the outside. So placemaking is a big part of what we do. Human capital. We have magazine right now. I encourage you all to sign up, please. It's a free registration opportunity. It's called Undercover Arts, and we're bringing it back after COVID. It's been 4 years since we published our last edition, but it's a magazine that this year will focus on arts and wellness. Every year it has a new theme, but it's a free listing opportunity. So you can list any creative business you have. There's 10 different sections: nonprofit, culinary arts, and visual arts. The goal is to help make the arts that might be undercover accessible, right? Yes, Google exists and we can find things through Google, but trying to help the individual artists connect with collaborators. That's really the goal of the magazine. And so we'll print 8,000 copies, distribute it all over the state. We'll have an online component this year too. So that registration is live. It's on our website. And then arts and health. I'll talk a little bit more about that because it connects to revival. Yeah, and just some numbers. I mean, I'm a numbers guy. I studied economics actually at college. So I think it is important to track what you're doing and then look at the story behind those numbers. But the story really is that we try to create as many opportunities for artists, and it's very important to us that they're benefiting. We're not a re-granting organization. Arts Foundation, Arizona Commission on the Arts, those are re-granting organizations. So we're not creating grants necessarily, but we want to create opportunity. Create a gig where someone can perform. Create a space where an artist can come and teach classes. That's where our mission really lies. So revival. All right. So when I look at our work, revival in space, Kevin's been talking about that. Revival is also something that, of course, affects our health. And a big part of what we've done is our partnerships in healthcare communities. So we've worked in the VA, the Veterans Hospital, and been running creative arts classes in the VA for over a decade. We also work with senior living communities to help bring in arts, but also just reinvigorate the arts that exist in that community. And when I think about the word revival, that to me is one of the best examples is, when we grow older, there's no such thing as retirement, right? Retirement is just, it's not stopping. And then, when you're getting older in life, creativity should never stop either. We think that we want to just relax and stop, but no matter where you're in life, you should be living with intent, living with vigor. And that's part of what we've tried to do is when we come into a community or are asked to come into a community, we often find that there's just tiredness with the existing program, right? So the clubs can become a little bit cliquish. People don't feel welcome or invited. There's not rotation what's happening. And our partnership at Fountains of La Cholla, that was one of the first outcomes. We came in, we were asked to do an assessment. What's not going right in this community? People aren't happy. They're not feeling vibrant. And we did surveys, and that was one of the first things we found is, people don't feel invited into these spaces in their own community. And we can try and change that culture, or we can just sort of start from scratch. Sometimes that's the right solution, is just start from scratch. And so in that situation, that was the solution actually, is just rather than trying to, have lots of conversations, invite new people into these clubs and spaces, let's just start some new clubs and start some new spaces. And that led to such an invigoration of that community. And it was based on one principle, which is that creativity doesn't have to come from outside. When you're in a community, you should first look at your internal resources and say, what is the creativity we have in here? And that's the biggest message we give to our healthcare partners is, don't assume that you have to bring in arts from outside. Ask your community. Does someone go to the symphony every week? Well, maybe they want to give a talk about their favorite classical pieces. Do you have any poets in your group? Maybe they want to lead a simple poetry writing class. And trying to think about that model where you're taking the people that live in the community and giving them confidence to share what they have with other people. And so a lot of the change that's happened at Fountains of La Cholla and then other communities we worked in, that's been the model. And then we can step out. And we have stepped out of a lot of communities because that's the goal, is once you create this feedback loop of creativity, it's just such a healthier climate. And so we work in Fountains of La Cholla, and there's just so many great stories here. It's really hard to go down them all, but Music and Memory is a wonderful program. And there's a community we work with up in Sabino Canyon. This is a great example of this. Does anyone know Missy Paschke-Wood? She's a DJ, Midtown Missy on KXCI. Just an awesome creative spirit. And so she's now the managing director at Hacienda the Canyon. And when she came in, the vision was, let's bring more creativity into this community. And one of the projects they did during COVID, which has now become an annual tradition, is they make a satirical musical that they rewrite the lyrics to some famous musical that everyone knows, and then the residents actually put on the musical. So they invite all the family in. It makes fun of themselves a lot. But now it happens at Arts Express space at Park Place Mall, so they rent it out. And they stage this whole production, and the residents do the costumes. The residents have rewritten the lyrics. The residents are doing the backdrops, and so it becomes this whole project for many months that they all kind of center around. And so it's just a great project. And one book I wanted to share, has anyone read this book, Your Brain on Art? This is a great one, too. It just came out last year. And I don't have any notes in here because I've just been listening to the audiobook. But it's a summary of how art affects your brain. All the studies to date. And there's for any creative person, there's a lot of powerful takeaways in there. But one of the things that I found interesting in there, it talks about there's the studies related to the aesthetic mindset. And I had never really heard that term before, but basically the idea of how susceptible are you to being influenced or having your emotions affected by aesthetic input. And that this is something that you can actually exercise like a muscle, allowing yourself to be moved. We talk about being moved by music or being moved by a piece of art. Well, what are the things that go into you being moved by a piece of art, right? And it is something very personalized, but it's even within your own self, thinking about, I know with my life, when I'm tired, I don't feel like being moved, right? I want to just turn on Netflix and relax, and I'm going to enjoy what I'm watching, but it's not necessarily something that's going to inspire me, right? And so that's been something I've been thinking more with this book is, well, when I do feel best about myself personally, it is when I feel inspired, right? That creates this flow, and I want to be productive in my soccer work and in my music work. Suddenly I'm doing everything a lot more productively because I'm in this state of inspiration. And so I am kind of always craving that and chasing that, and sometimes I get in, for me personally, I get in work mode, and I don't feel like taking a minute to read a paragraph that's inspirational because I don't have time for that. So I have to step out of that and be like, all right, no, this is going to be good for me. This is going to be healthy because it will enhance everything else I'm doing in my life. And so this framework, it is talking about, well, that's part of that is the aesthetic mindset, is how, prepared are you to be moved. And, if you have a background in music, you're obviously going to be able to appreciate what's happening on the radio more. Same thing with visual arts. But one study that they mentioned, for all you visual artists, there's an expressive arts therapist named Kathy Sullivan who did a big project with firefighters and first responders, and to help them cope with all the traumatic work they were doing, and just because one thing they're reporting is, I just have so much anxiety after work, right? Whether I failed or succeeded during that day, I'm just carrying all that with me, and I can't shut my brain off at night. And so they went through a series of artistic practices to see if it could help them focus. Right? And so doodling was one of the top results. And I bet we have a lot of doodlers. Are there doodlers? We got a lot of doodlers here. Yeah, is someone doodling right now? Yeah, it's okay. I approve. Because this study actually shows that doodling increases brain flow. It increases activity in your prefrontal cortex, and it increases your focus. And so that it was like, okay, yeah, it's good to doodle. I should take some time and intentionally doodle. Anyway, so if you want to feel better about your doodling, you can read this book. But revival of the spirit, revival of these programs, something we'll continue to work on. And community, I think you might also recognize Ken there, but a lot of our programs are intended to revive community connections. A lot of our festivals are free, trying to bring people together. And that's the goal, is to create an experience where you're kind of reviving that community connection. And I just wanted to finish one other example. We started the whole session talking about music, but this is an event that's very near and dear to my heart, the Tucson Folk Festival. And one thing that we try to do as an organization is help revive community events. Tucson Folk Festival is a good example of, this is a 40-year-old event, 100% free to the public, 100% volunteer run. And we have so many events like this in Tucson, right, where it's just driven by passionate founders, people that had an artistic and creative vision, and the ones that make it past 5 years, right, then they kind of enter this zone where they're growing and growing. But all of these events, they have kind of inflection points where they have to rethink the model. And so I'd been on the board for a few years when COVID hit, and the festival had grown so much. It's like, we can't continue like this. Our volunteers aren't able to sign up. A lot of them can't carry boxes anymore, so there's physical challenges that are happening. And so there's a lot of very real kind of threats and challenges that were happening at the festival, where the previous board president said to me, I think that someone else should just absorb the festival, or it's not going to happen. And I really took that to heart. And so she had to move out of state, and so that's when I became board president. And I knew that I can't do this alone. This would have to be something that SOCA has to support. There has to be infrastructure. There has to be staffing. There has to be more kind of professional skill sets coming in. And that's where we've entered this phase now of revival for the festival, where every year there's more and more people coming to this event. We have nearly 20,000 people that come to the festival now. It's a 3-day event, happens in downtown Tucson at the beginning of April. And so I really encourage you to come. But it's just a win-win where SOCA gets to be involved to support the infrastructure of the festival, but it's still an event where it has its own independent board, its own, its own sustainability. But we've entered this new phase where it just continues to grow and continue to be what it is. We have over 450 musicians that perform at this event, 450 acts, 6 stages. So maybe I'm preaching to the choir. A lot of you been to the folk festival? It's okay if you haven't been. There's a lot of people that haven't been. So this is an event we really hope just will continue. But it's thinking, events like Tucson Meet Yourself, don't just assume it's a given that they'll be able to continue in the way that it continues. These big free events go through a lot of changes. And so we want to be part of the infrastructure of how those events and festivals can continue. And moving forward, we do really, you get a second? Oh, I'm going the wrong way. I just want to close with this idea of going back to advocacy, that we do really believe in public investment in the arts because, here in Tucson, we have this, if not the highest, the second highest per capita number of nonprofits of any city in the country. It's because we have so many passionate people that want to start a project, and this is just arts and culture nonprofits, over 340 arts and culture nonprofits in Tucson. And that ecosystem, that infrastructure, it exists with zero public funding in Tucson. Scottsdale gives over $15 million a year to arts organizations. Mesa gives over $25 million a year to organizations. So because there's so much lack of funding at the state level, a lot of cities have stepped up, and counties have stepped up. So we would really love to see that happen for Southern Arizona. Timing is everything, and who knows when it can happen, but we just want you to continue thinking about how that could change the ecosystem and change our community if we could have kind of some guaranteed funding for the symphony and the ballet, but then also individual artists. How do we have this public system that could support our creative community? So I'll pause there. That's kind of the 360. I know I went on a lot of different tangents, but Kevin and I decided let's just pack as much inspiration as we can in here and hopefully learn a little bit about SOCA too in the course of all that. So anything you want to kind of add to that as closing, Kevin? Yeah, absolutely. Do we have some time for questions? Is that,
yeah.
Okay.
So don't go too far. We're actually going to
Okay.
launch into our Q&A.
Okay.
So y'all know the drill. I'm going to pick whatever hand I see first and then go from there. Got one over here. And then got to parrot your questions for our people on our live stream. Wait.
Hey guys, just from a branding perspective, are you dropping the S and is it going to be Aka, or can we have a sneak peek of what the new name / brand may be?
Yes. So we won't be making the official switch until probably July or later, but our new name is going to be Art State Arizona. Yeah. We did, of course, consider just dropping the S, but we actually thought there'd be too much confusion with the Arizona Commission on the Arts, which is ACA, for us to be AACA. And I also at first thought that, who's going to want to say ACA? But then who really wanted to say SOCA? So it's okay. But yes, Art State Arizona. That's our name.
Get my steps in this morning.
Hi. So you guys do a lot of stuff here at SOCA. How do you find motivation and the confidence to try something new and do something that you haven't really done before? Because you're doing a lot and it's really amazing. How do you get that first little spark of inspiration? How do you get the confidence to move forward?
Let's start with Cal.
Yeah, great question. I think the fortunate thing about working in the creative economy is you get to work with creatives who are often inspiring. So for me, it's always the people people. So when someone comes to the door and they have a vision, it's like, so it's that energy based, you know, which I have a lot of family and other coworkers that work in fields that aren't, you know, like that, you know, say conservation or something like that, or, you know, social justice, you know, a lot of uphill battles. And I think as much as we can tie all those things together and uplift each other in all the different ways that our community is uplifted, that's what inspires me to come to work. To where how can we thread the arts into areas where we really need to support each other, show up. So,
I would. Oh, this does keep coming. I would just add that a lot of credit to Kate. She is just an energizer bunny of energy, and we'll often get emails from her very late because when she gets excited, she just wants to run with it and get something done. So I've learned a lot from working with her of just being willing to get started. That's half the battle. Just I can get lost in my head a little bit about wanting to do the research and look at the different options, look at what's been done out there already, and comes a certain point that you just do it, right? And if it's been done before, that's okay. You're going to do it, and maybe you'll do it better, or maybe you'll do it worse, but just do it. You know? And so that's one thing, is that spirit of just not being afraid to get started and being afraid to do something you haven't done before. You know, kind of that old fake it till you make it philosophy. And the second thing I would say is that listening to opportunity. You know, this is something we've talked a lot about as an organization, is how do you know, what is mission drift? Like, do the opportunities follow you saying, here's my mission and what I'm going to be doing? Or does your mission follow the opportunities that exist? And both are okay and both are right at different times. But a lot of our work involves listening to the community and trying to recognize when there's both a need and an opportunity for something. So one example is our partnership with the town of Sarita. So we have a 5-year agreement with the town of Sarita. We support their arts and culture programming and public art projects. And so it's allowed us this way to kind of listen to continual feedback from both the Sarita community, but also the Sarita town level. And they have this challenge where they have these mega events they've built up, the Winterfest and their October celebration, that had just become so big that their staff couldn't manage them anymore. And that's a great problem, right? You've built this successful thing, but it becomes a public problem when the staff can't manage it, and it becomes a safety issue. And so they decided at their retreat last year, we need to actually get rid of one of these events. We're going to keep our winter celebration. We have to get rid of this October celebration, but we want to do something else. And this is 5 months away. And so we were one of their calls to just say, we have this problem. Do you have any ideas of what we could do? Could you put this together? And so we hadn't been thinking about putting together a fall celebration or Oktoberfest celebration for Sarita, but suddenly this opportunity presented itself. It's like, yes, let's run with that. We'll do it. We can put it together. And so you can come out. Friday, September 26th, Sarita Oktoberfest, first annual. But we're excited. It's going to be a great event.
Yeah. And then we've got time for one more question after this one.
Is this working? I don't think it's working. Oh, for the live streamers. I got you. Okay. You talked a little bit about your challenges with funding moving forward, the endowment of the arts. I get the sense that if Catalyst wasn't a thing, that the spirit of this, the operation would still move forward. Like, what are your challenges moving forward? What doors do you start knocking on for the funding you're looking for? How do we keep these lights on in the future if that endowment didn't exist?
Yeah. That's a great question. We want to see Catalyst continue. It is still something that is essentially underwritten by SACA and our staff. And so we want this to continue to grow and be sustainable. We have offices available, and we have rooms available. So if any of you have a need for office space or teaching space or an idea, we are definitely, talk to Kevin. We are actively seeking partners, kitchen partners, if you have a food need. So that's one side of it, is we're trying to grow the partners here and find more key holders and users of the space so we can kind of keep getting closer to sustainability. But then, yeah, I mean, the kind of the big elephant in the room is the public arts investment. We don't receive a grant directly from the NEA, but we'd love to see more grants and support available that could help underwrite a space like this. But yeah, I think that would be the big thing I would call out, is we're looking for partners that have a need, or also bigger partners. It could also be, we're always open to ideas. these rooms are what they are because of the current use, but if someone has another idea for one of these bigger rooms, it's certainly a conversation that could be had. Anything you'd add to that?
Yeah, I think our strategy is kind of just supporting and I think more conversation, more creative morning, better, more where our strengths are.
And last question before we jump into our 30-second pitches. And if not, Matt and Kevin will be around. Yeah.
Thank you for the presentation, for what you do for the arts community. I think it's great. Just a little question, a little bit like I always say, like a flipping the tortilla, right? You have talked about the success and everything else. Can you share, if possible, what has been the learning lesson, the failure? Maybe many, right, to get to that. But what would be the most significant if you can kind of narrow it down? Thank you.
Yeah. Failure from Catalyst?
Failure from Catalyst. The expectation, we've tried a lot in the state, and I will not lie. A lot of it is not perfect. We put massive amounts of energy into doing 3 months of second Saturday art markets where we invited artists and no one came to the shop. So I think part of the challenge is kind of being okay with some of these failures and then trying a different way or, kind of getting the feedback from everybody and not throwing in the towel. Because especially during COVID, there was many times, how. So I think, just learning from what worked, what's not. Yeah, I think specifically though, when you put a lot of energy into something and no one comes out, is a challenge for the artist. And I know every artist knows that. Every artist has that experience. When you experience that organizationally, we built this space. No one's really coming. What that's self-doubt. So as a metaphor, I think that's like our practice. Find renewal and revival. Try to continuously adapt.
I'll add just kind of a quick second example from our external programs. We generally, as a nonprofit, we work with a partner to create an opportunity for an artist. We'll do a call to artists, and then the partner selects finalists from that process, and then an artist moves forward in the commission. We ourselves are generally not, we haven't been in the practice of creating art. But there have been some times that either we just couldn't find an artist that would be able to do something on the vision. So we have done some public art installations, and they have not all succeeded. Doing public art is extremely hard. You're matching your budget, matching the install logistics, and so not all of them have been successes. I would say we've had no failures, but not everything has been a success to the degree that we want. So we did an event called Flower Bomb up in Phoenix, where the goal was to create 10,000 paper flowers and then install them in a shopping center. And so we were trying to recruit community groups, and at the end of the day, we couldn't find enough community members that wanted to make paper flowers, and so we sat in a room for like 10 hours making paper flowers, which even doing that as quickly as you can, you're not going to get to the volume you need. And then of course, the wind came in and a bunch of the flowers blew away. It was just like, oh my gosh, this was so much harder than we thought it was. And so that was a learning lesson that we have taken, and there's been we've learned from that. So Art on the Lake in Sarita, we do one art installation, a floating art installation on a lake. First year we did giant inflatable animals, and it worked pretty well, but they were blowing around. And so the next year we got to iterate, and we came up with a new concept, and then we came up with a new concept, and every year it just got to be a little bit better, learning from the problems and then coming up with a new installation of something that's a little less time intensive, a little more durable. Luckily we have a partner in Sarita, going back to that example, that's willing to invest in that risk and that iteration, and we feel really thankful for that.
And I just want to give a big round of applause to Catalyst, Matt and Kelly. Thank you so much for hosting us. Of course. And honestly, thank you for the inspiration. Tucson is abundant in so many artists and just incredible spaces. So thank you, thank you, thank you. We really appreciate your time this morning. And for those of y'all in the crowd, we're going to close out with our 30-second pitch segment. For those of y'all who don't know, we're very strict on our time. We've got 30 seconds on our timer. So those of y'all who signed up to pitch, please come over here with Ryan. I will hand it over to them. to close us out.
Alicia, myself. What a great talk. And what a cool stage. I had like, what if we had a photography mixer? Great space. So,
That might give you privacy. Thank you. Okay, great.
Hi, my name is Danielle. I will be currently looking for a job starting in September.